Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing our series of covering every single weapon in the First Descendant, and today we have landed on the ultimate level shotgun, Smithereens. So we'll start with the build sheet, and I'll put this down below in the description and in the comments as well, but there's a bunch to go over with this weapon, a lot of conditionals, a lot of asterisks, and a lot of explanation that goes into this. This is going to be your optimal DPS, and if you can swap like Hawkeye and hit rate focus out of here to have even more DPS, you certainly could. I just think it's a bit unreasonable for most people to be even land that, but there's going to be a lot of conditions that line up with this. I know I can already hear in my head the comments coming from Real Life Fighter. If you are unable to hit Real Life Fighter here in the moments that we're going to talk about for this weapon, this is a very conditional weapon on its DPS output, then you can very easily swap it for Unstoppable Smasher, Element Conductor, or Strengthened First Shot. It's not going to have as much of an impact as Real Life Fighter. The beauty of Smithereens is it has a base shell capacity of 10, which means if you land every single shot as the passive asks you to for the unique ability on the weapon, you can instantly stack Real Life Fighter in a single shot. However, you need to have the situation that requires you to be able to be close enough to actually have all of those pellets hit in succession, which when you run two accuracy add-ons with high rate focus, hit rate focus, and Hawkeye, it is actually reasonable against commanders, elites, and against colossi, especially when they get staggered, but in normal situations against random mobs or mobs that move quickly, it's not really that reasonable. So you have to kind of understand what the strengths of the weapon is and figure out what you're going to be using it for. I ran it as a normal weapon. If you're not able to activate the passive, you're not able to use Real Life Fighter, the normal DPS is about a tamer level of DPS output, which, given the fact that high power rounds are so scarce and difficult to get a hold of, the fact that it does about a tamer's level of DPS is kind of disappointing. That's not really something you would expect to see from that level, but this weapon has very, very extremely mucho DPS burst potential if you can line it up properly and activate its passive while also giving it a very high boost in that. So let's look at what this weapon does and talk about what those situations are. So this weapon has a pitiful 1% crit rate and a pitiful 1.1 times or 110% crit damage scalar and a pitiful 1 times or 100% weak point damage on that. So one times on this. Not super impressive. But there's two things that make this weapon different than the other shotguns listed. The first is going to be its unique ability, obviously. This one will have an aim recovery speed and a down fire rate. This doesn't go to 0 when you max these out. But if you land every single pellet from the shell onto the target, it will be a guaranteed crit for every single pellet, and it will add a little baby bit of 5% crit damage to that as well. But the big thing here is that you get a guaranteed crit if you land every single pellet on the target. It also has a self buff. When you fully upgrade this ability, it goes to 2-second duration, and this adds a flat shell capacity of 2. Shell capacity is the amount of pellets that you have in the shot, which means that it raises the hits per shot from 10 to 12, and I tested this. You can't modify this value if you run like Unstoppable Smasher or you run Shell Up, which increases your shell amount by a percentage. It won't affect the amplification buff that you get from the passive. This is a flat 2 no matter what, and you can't buff it, you can't alter it, that's it. The other downside with this is it doesn't refresh itself when you hit it as well. So if we show this here, you can actually walk up to a target. If you hit every single shot, like if you put the weapon down in their mouth, like you're a dentist, like you just shove it in their throat, you'll be able to get that stacked up. You also can't refresh this buff, so it's going to fall off no matter what you do. You can't maintain it for the full magazine, unfortunately, or full shot. So you're gonna shoot, it'll run, it'll turn off and go back in here. The other cool thing about this weapon, all of the normal shotguns are a per round realistic reload. You're actually shelling each shell in one at a time, which means that if you're going to stay on things like subconsciousness or in a blink, you have to actually animation cancel every single round in order to get full value out of that shotgun. However, the two ultimate shotguns don't have this downside. They have a full magazine of shells. So if you empty all of your shells out at a target and then you reload, it's going to reload the full magazine, all of your rounds available, in one reload time. This gives you more value on reload as a stat, but also makes it a lot more reasonable to stay on the weapon and use all of its ammo rather than having to animation cancel every single round as you go through, which, as you saw if you watched my shotgun video, we recommend running auto reload using all of your rounds, and when it's time to reload, you switch off the weapon, let it reload while it's on your back, and then come back for burst damage. But for Smithereens and the other ultimate, which we'll talk about in a different video, it doesn't have that main downside. So the two big things are guaranteed crits from the passive, extra shell capacity with that as well, and a single magazine reload in one single animation, which you can cancel, by the way, but it's not as required as it would be for the shell by shell by shell method that we have with the other shotguns. But if we jump back to the screen, the burst DPS that we're seeing here is requiring you to shove the rifle or the barrel end of this down their throat. Like, you have to be right up on top of them in order to get the passive to activate. We're even running 2 accuracy mods here. Keep in mind that Real Life Fighter does lower accuracy as well. You do get great value out of Weak Point Sight, the shotgun version, which for whatever reason has the exact same name as Weak Point Sight, the blue mod. They just decided not to rename it, so I've put shotgun in parentheses here, but it is a mod that will give you nice weak point damage. This weapon does great with weak point and has that extra value there. But the realistic question is, if it normally does about tamer level of DPS, and you have to have a very specific condition in order to activate it, how useful is the weapon overall? And I think that's going to be a question you have to ask yourself. There are going to be times that if you run enough accuracy on this weapon, like if you run Hawkeye maxed out and hit rate focus maxed out, you can actually get this reticle to be a pretty reasonable size. And on some like in infiltration missions like the dungeons, if you have a relatively stable commander or elite that is pacing back and forth sideways, you can very easily hit every single shot and get the guaranteed crit plus weak point on their head to stack that up, as long as you're paying very close attention to where you're putting the shots. So you can get some great damage out of it, and I think this probably encapsulates what high power rounds were kind of intended to be, in that you're normally using your other weapons, you're using your Gregs, your Nazastras, your Thunder Cage, your Enduring Legacy, all of those, and then when the opportunity arises for that weapon to shine, say when a Colossi kneels down, or it's a Colossi that has like a deployable like Devour, when Devour puts up those 3 canisters, you walk up to the canister, switch to Smithereens, blow it to Smithereens, and then you switch off of it, and that's what you'll use it for. That's the weapon function. But if you're asking me if you should use it as a normal weapon for regular uptime, it's okay. It's just, again, it does about tamer level of DPS with way less available rounds. So I think that this is probably a question of, is this where they want shotguns to be? Do they want to be very specific situations where you bring them out? Or should there be like impact round or special round shotguns that you can use all the time? Because I think there are a lot of people that love using shotguns out there. They love the gameplay of shotguns, but having shotguns in general being kind of weak on the side that you have to bring them out at the right moment. Otherwise, they're going to lose out to the high uptime DPS focused weapons that exist in the game right now. Should they be buffed? Like 2.2 million burst DPS is nothing to gawk at. This, if you can actually sit to the point where you can shove this down their throat, you can match like Glay levels of DPS for that moment that you have ammo for the Smithereens. It's very, very good. But you're going to run out of ammo pretty quickly, and how often in a normal infiltration mission or a normal Colossus battle are you going to be able to fully activate the passive on this weapon? That's kind of up in the air. It depends on the player, depends on the encounter. There's going to be some of the Colossi that this suits better, and there's going to be some that it really, really doesn't. It's going to be very hard to activate this on the Slender, like Dead Bride, those kinds of bosses that like have very small weak points. Like, you know, their stabilizers aren't that big on their legs. You can't stagger them as easily, and even then they move a little bit more aggressively, or they animate more aggressively. Hanged Man that's sitting above the arena a little bit further away might not be as reasonable to aim up and shoot that. So you kind of have to pick your battles when it comes to this weapon, but I'm happy to report that it is actually quite great if you can activate the passive for it. If you want to not have Real Life Fighter here, you can run Unstoppable Smasher. You can drop this down to like 1.9 million, still very respectable DPS, and I think it fits into that overall. So the optimal setup for this would be Real Life Fighter, action and reaction, shell up is very good, rifling reinforcement, elemental enhancement versus the weakness, better concentration, and then weak point sight, expand weapon charge, and 2 accuracy. I think you really, really want at least 2 accuracy. Hit rate focus scale is the best for this weapon, and Hawkeye is very good. This will give you a very small accuracy buildup, like a very small reticle, so you can actually more consistently activate the passive, and having that is very crucial because, again, If you don't activate the passive regularly, it becomes about a tamer with very little ammo. So you kind of have to pick that battle and pick between those. But if you like the weapon, Smithereens is great. It functions for what it does, and I think we'll have to just monitor it going forward to see what they want to use shotguns for, and of course, whether they fit the role that they're looking for, or if we should have some kind of other, like, combat shotgun or action shotgun that you can put in the impact round role is what I'm envisioning, but it could be anything else that would be a little bit more of a normal usage rather than just, you know, when I get the chance to get very close to the target and do a lot of burst DPS, and the rest of the time it just sits on my back and weighs me down. That's what I got for the Smithereens. Thanks for watching. Let me know what we should cover next in the next guide. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.